Hi everyone, and thank you for logging in for this webinar today. We've got a good registration list, so I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping and then we'll hope to start a couple of minutes after the hour once we've got the majority of people online. So, as I said, thank you very much for joining us. You're hopefully aware that you're attending a webinar talking about the findings from the user engagement programme, and we've got a number of the segment product managers on the line today who are going to talk you through the various sectors involved in the programme and what you've told us and what it means for the future of OS data. Most of you recognising the names will be familiar with the GoToWebinar panel. I'm Hannah Williams, Partner Marketing Manager, and I'm set up as webinar host. So if you have any technical issues during the webinar, then you can send a chat message to me and I will do my best to troubleshoot that for you. We try to use the raise your hand icon to get attention if you have any major technical issues and can't use the chat function. So I was wondering if we can just test that now. So if on the panel you can find your hands up button and click it for me, just to let me know that that's working and you can hear me okay. Brilliant. Okay, a couple of you have done that. Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you. I'm just going to lower those now. So you can use that at any point to get my attention about technical issues. Also, throughout the session, please feel free to put questions into the question panel. We'll come on to those at the end so that we can kind of go through the presentation and then go one by one on the questions. And then if you've got anything after the session that you think of, then feel free to contact us. If it's about general webinar questions or suggestions for future webinars, please do use the webinars@os.uk email address. Otherwise, if it's pertinent to the content that the team are sharing, there is an email address in the slides for you to reference as well. We are recording the webinar, which is why you're all muted, and we will share the recording directly to you from the GoToWebinar system straight after the session, but also in the partner newsletter, which will be coming in the next couple of weeks, and the partner portal, which hopefully you've all got access to. So it looks like we've got a good group of people on the line today. I'm really pleased that our segment PMs have been able to join us. So we've got Dean, Egbe, James, Nikki, Rebecca and Simon on the line with us today. And they're all absolutely key to this programme and to the development of OS products going forward. So for now, I'm going to hand over to Egbe, who's going to start us off on an intro and then each of the PMs, and then I'll come back at the end and go through any questions that you might have. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to the team, and I'll see you in a few minutes' time.
Thank you, Hannah. Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So the purpose of this presentation, as Hannah says, kind of showcase the work that we, the segment PMs, have been conducting and delivering for the PSGA user engagement program. So a quick run through of the agenda. We're going to give a quick intro to what the PSGA is. And essentially this is just background and is mainly for those who haven't seen or heard this information before. So some of it will be familiar to those that have been on previous webinars or taking part in our user engagement, but it's just to kind of just set a bit of context. We're going to do a quick intro to the OS product team, talk a bit more about the user engagement process, and then we'll talk about the deliverables for April 22, April 23, and then any changes that kind of been made to that, and we'll go through next steps. Thank you. Next slide, please. So just as I said, quick intro to the Public Sector Geospatial Agreement, PSGA. This kind of builds on our world-leading location expertise to the public sector OS partners and developers to support the delivery of critical infrastructures right from blue light to street light. So what this agreement really builds on is kind of that new richer data, so to give people and organizations a deeper and richer picture of built natural environment. There's also kind of new ways to access this data to open up ideas and opportunities for the public sector, businesses, and also researchers. And then there's obviously new freedoms to share this data, making it easier for third parties to share information, linking data sets in their own data and products and services as well. So we are developing new PSGA data and services, working closely with the Geospatial Commission user experts, PSGA members and OS partners to make sure that they meet your needs and your customers' needs. So next slide, please. So I guess a big question, why are we changing? We're removing barriers to OS location data, and this will enable innovation and better decision making for customers, both new and existing across all sectors. So essentially, next slide, please. We want our data and products to meet your needs. Some of the things you've told us is that, I'm not going to read all of it, but just some of it is kind of our data needs to be usable. It needs to be out of the box, usable, and easy to use for analysis. We heard that our data, which we know is available in multiple products across multiple products with limited cross-product reference and also at different currencies, which kind of just makes that discoverability management a bit of a headache and an overhead. We can't forget COVID pandemic, and this has led to evolving user needs and the way people use data, especially geospatial data. So by April 23, we will ensure that our data and services will evolve to meet this changing needs and requirements, allowing you to kind of get that access to that data when you need it, making sure that the data is optimized for analytical purposes and use cases. There's that ability to kind of have up-to-daily updates. And then we'll have data, again, that needs to be easy to use directly in your application, so plug and play. And let's not forget the last point there is kind of making sure that the cross references show throughout all the data products, including identifiers where possible. Next slide, please. So the way we've kind of done this, and to enable us to understand more of your requirements, challenges, use cases, these are the market segments we've focused on with the team of segment PMs. And I'll just kind of let you kind of read through all the segments that we have on the screen right now. And then next screen, please. Next slide, please. So this are your segment PMs, that's a team of segment PMs that are taking a lead on a few of those segments. So we have Simon, James, Egbe, Dean, and Jess. Jess, as you can see, has moved to a new role as a customer lead, and Nikki has joined the team of segment PMs and taking management of those segments. Dean has also now moved to a new role as strategic product manager, leading on changes that we're going to talk about today, and with Rebecca joining the team to lead on this segment. So a lot of you might have spoken to Dean and Jess in the past, but those conversations don't end with Nikki and Rebecca picking up those conversations as well. Now, I guess getting on to kind of the UE process, the user engagement process, and sharing some stats with you. So essentially, the PSGA is the largest and most important program of work OS has ever committed to delivering for PSGA members, partners, and stakeholders. This would ensure we deliver the next generation of enhanced and enriched OS data and services to support our customers and partners. And the key to delivering this is this user engagement by talking to our customers and partners such as yourself. It is vital that we understand your requirements and those of your customers now and for the future. And this will kind of help us build a stronger understanding of your use cases and obviously those of your customers, putting you at the heart of the user engagement program, helping to kind of drive that product and service design process and proposition development. So the user engagement using industry-leading collaborative user design for new data, so making sure that the customers and partners are all engaged and included in evidence and what we're designing and what we're building. And using this approach also helps us to identify any future needs and trends to ensure that we have a successful and sustainable future together. So this diagram essentially provides an overview of how UE user engagement is broken down into defined stages. So you've got discovery, which is identifying customer needs. Concept development is kind of looking at that draft proposition and looking at what the product data offer looks like. Concept development. Evaluation, it's kind of looking at prototyping, trying to review some illustrative data, prototype data to refine what those requirements are and also capture further customer insight. And then you've got the product specification, which we kind of take all those requirements and start to delve into them to kind of plot out what those requirements look like, and trying to specify what those data sets are, and in the hope that we can start to share data with customers and partners like yourself to within the test and refine stage, kind of alpha and beta trials. And then we move on to stage 6, which is launch, and that's kind of going into the first release into full launch. And then obviously you have evaluation after that, which will kind of happen along the same time. And it's kind of periodic review where we'll kind of do field survey research to just make sure what we're doing is still meeting your needs and all of that. So I guess the most important bit to note about this is that the process is continuous, hence being a circle. It just doesn't end at one stage. We just have to continue the user engagement to just make sure we get the data and services that are valuable and meets your requirements. So the next slide will provide insight into the work we've completed so far. So just kind of aligning back to the circle in the first stage, where all the conversations and all the asks generated helped in the development of the PSAA contract as we know it. And that kind of generated over 1,800 asks. And that kind of taking all of that and what was part of the PSAA taken out as July last year to go have a lot of one-to-one discussions where we engage with 127 organizations across 8 key market segments. And we also had a few feedback workshops to just try and see if we can be a bit more focused and getting those detailed requirements out in one sitting. And then moving on to stage 3, which kind of started from December up until last month, where 168 organizations we engaged with, and increasing the number of market segments that we also engage with. We had mainly throughout this period, we ran a series of workshops, which I'm sure a few of you would have attended, and that came up to about 18. And that span around 319 PSAA members and OS partners attending those workshops. So quite good numbers there. We tried to make sure that we kind of got that range of feedback from all sorts of customers, users, across all sectors. Next slide, please. So the way we kind of did that is that normally would have met customers face-to-face and partners face-to-face, but due to COVID and our current remote working conditions, we've had to evolve our approach to a more digital one, using a combination of Teams, Microsoft Teams, Housepace, Slido, and Mural. And it's kind of digital tools that I'm sure some of you would have used and when you're engaging with us. This enabled us to engage with the wider audience, so we had a wider customer reach, which obviously require less travel, and which invariably has benefits for the environment. Most importantly, it also enabled us to hear all voices equally. So where people could be vocal, they were vocal or verbal, and where they had to feedback any responses anonymously, they had a chance to and the freedom to. So we, as a result of that, as I said, wider customer reach, where we spoke to, sorry, next slide, where we've managed to speak to a lot of PSAA members and OS partners and also Geovisual members. Sorry, I should have just said just a few quotes there from a few workshop attendees in terms of the tools that we used. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as I said, we've spoken to, because of that wider reach, we ended up speaking to a lot of PSG members, OS partners and Geovation members to ensure that breadth and depth of understanding of use cases and requirements throughout the user engagement, and product development process. So with all the customers you're seeing at the moment, definitely doesn't show all the customers we spoke to, but gives an indication of the breadth of central, local, and partners and Geovation members that we've engaged with during this process. So I think I'll just take a pause right there for now, and I'll hand you over to Dean, who's going to talk to you more about more new ways to access data. Dean.
Thank you, Egbe. Good morning, everyone. Nice to have you all on the call. I see we've got a good number this morning, which is always great. As Egbe said at the start, I've changed roles, so I think some of you will know that, but just to bring everybody else on the call up to speed, I've become a strategic product manager across the summer. And what that ultimately means is I'm helping the other segment product managers on this call to deliver all of the changes that we're sort of going to talk about. So my main focus for this webinar is just to talk you through where we're at with all of the user discovery we've completed for April 2022. And then I'll hand back to the segment product managers to talk to you about our plans and how they're shaping up for the delivery the following year. So if we just go on to the next slide, please. So April 2022 then. So that is all about taking the data that is in the products you know today. So depending on how you count them, we're in and around that 70 plus mark for existing OS products. And what we're doing is taking, as I say, all of that data content and giving it a new structure and putting it into a new interface to create a lot more bespoke ability for you and for your customers to take just the data you need. So it's not focused on delivering new data. That comes a bit later, and that's what the segment product managers are going to talk to you about. But it's about how can we make our existing data much more accessible, much more discoverable, and generally easier to use. So that's what April 22 is all about. So if we just look at some of the feedback we've got, because we've done, as Egbe says, some feedback workshops and some one-to-one sort of conversations. And so there we go. You can sort of see our latest sort of stats on how that discovery has gone. So we've engaged with 68 unique organizations just about April 2022. So really good number, actually. It was a very refined and quick bit of user discovery. So we only undertook it for a period of about 4 to 6 weeks. So to get 68 organizations involved is really, really good. To focus on partners, as obviously that's who's on this call this morning. We've got 10 different partner organizations, which again is a good number. But what I was really pleased to see was actually 62 attendees to these workshops and these sessions were brand new to our user discovery. So those stats you saw on the earlier slides from Egbe showed you the overall number, but it's really great that we're seeing new attendees and new people to share ideas with still coming into our user discovery program, which is something we would really encourage. So that's really good as well. So overall, really, really good numbers, and it gives us that good grounding and basis to continue our development and our plans for what we'll be delivering in April 22. So if we look at some of the key feedback that we received, and I can sort of talk you through how we're enacting that and how this is shaping our plans. So first and foremost, hopefully most of you on this call would have hopefully engaged with some of that user discovery we've undertaken. But if you haven't, and this is maybe the first webinar you've partaken in, then our new data structure and that new interface will be designed around concepts of themes, collections, and feature types. I won't go into too much detail into them today because we'll definitely run out of time if I do. But those concepts were presented in the user discovery, received really, really well, which is really good. But we had some feedback around were the terms and what we were calling these collections a bit too technical and not necessarily the best for new customers or new partners. So we've just taken that away, and we're just working on making sure there is plain English as possible. It's a really good bit of feedback there. Moving on to the second box, the recipe builder. So that is our new interface. It's the thing that we're calling that new interface. I've got, again, really, really positive feedback, but very much taking on board some comments around, to provide us with the best feedback possible, you need to get hands-on with it. Now, at this moment in time, it doesn't physically exist. We are still building it, and that's why we haven't enabled an ability for you to get hands-on yet. But it's something we're really, really keen to do. So as that development progresses through the rest of this calendar year, and indeed the rest of this financial year, then it will definitely be something that we actively encourage. So we'll be coming out to you with designs and test systems, so you can absolutely have a play. So that was really good finding and feedback from the discovery as well. And then lastly on this slide, we also are just kicking off a project to look at the best ways we can support you, whether that is with more webinars like this, whether it's with more technical documentation, code snippets, or all of the above. We're doing a bit of work there just to make sure as these new things come to market, you absolutely have got all the support material and knowledge that you need. So that's being done as well. So just looking at some extra things that we found, if we just move on to the next slide, please. And this is a bit more data design heavy, so that new data structure I've mentioned. Overall, left-hand box, super, super positive. So we had some really great feedback about how we're designing, for example, the new buildings data, or how we're structuring the address data. We had some really, really great feedback on that. So what that allows us to do is have a lot more confidence in what we're building and our designs, which is really positive news. But just looking at the next 3 boxes, we absolutely are just exploring the benefit and the additional value of maybe introducing CSV. It's something we want to explore a bit further. So if you have any thoughts on that, absolutely have a conversation with your segment PMs that you've probably already started. So that's something that's on our radar. Need to do a bit more work. Like I say, it's not a definitive as and when, but we're looking into that from some feedback we received. Then moving on to the next one, something a little new for OS, but we're hearing loud and clear that when we use classification codes in our products, so you'll see that in address, for example, that it's really beneficial to introduce a textual, human legible format of that as well. So we're absolutely keen on implementing that in April 22 as much as we can. And then lastly, through this new interface we're introducing, we are giving much more bespoke ability, as I mentioned, to just take the data from us that you want. And the way you do that is by filtering our data on specific attribution. So exactly which attribution you can do that on and how that is implemented is a design that we're still working through. So we explored that in some of the feedback sessions and had some really great inputs from participants. So we have a wireframe now, and that will be something we continue to build out in the coming months, but really positive, like I say, reception to that and framing of those conversations was really valuable in those sessions as well. So something we're taking forward. So that's all from me. So that was all about April 22, as I say. I'm going to hand over to James and the rest of the segment PMs just to walk you through the April 23 deliverables and what we're finding there.
Thanks, Dean. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So as Dean said, this next section focuses on the key findings and outcomes from the user engagement for the new richer data. So this is about what we're delivering from April 2023, and it builds on the deliverables that Dean's just introduced and those enhancements. And we're actually delivering 70 new data enhancements based on the detailed user engagements and insight gathering. We're also delivering a new archive service to provide easier and greater access to an archive of OS data to support a range of use cases. And we're launching a new visualization service, which will be consistent with the new richer data. Next slide, please. So throughout the user engagement, you will have probably spoken to us in the context of the market segments that we've already introduced. But here you'll see that we, to support some of the user engagement and some of the critical design decisions, and for our operational and customer facing colleagues, we focused on these 9 data themes, which also supported with the delivery of the finalised milestone specifications to the Geospatial Commission. And the following slides will focus on these key data themes and the key findings and outcomes. And first up is buildings. So we can just go back on one slide. There we go. So we discovered that buildings are really important to a wide number of the market segments with wide-reaching and diverse use cases. So as a result of that, we will continue engaging with a wide range of users and interest to maximize the value and to continue building our understanding of your use cases. And this will include the test and refine phase, so that's stage gate 5 or phase 5 from September this year. Some of the more valuable and most requested enhancements to support these use cases were for number of floors, the building type, building use, building age, and construction type. So in total, we're developing 16 new building enhancements, and that's also including the improved currency, new description, and enhanced attribute and lifecycle metadata I covered in a buildings workshop for the more new ways to access data, which Dean just spoke about, and that webinar was back in July. We understood that significant value would be delivered by bringing together additional OS-rich content with other third-party sources. So we recognise that to best meet your needs, we'll collate and combine data from other authoritative sources. And then finally on buildings, we recognise the additional value, that additional value would be identified in capturing the presence of green roofs and solar panels, and also in expanding the coverage of building type. So this was through an increasing focus from users on decarbonisation and achieving net zero. So we're adding in presence of green roofs and presence of solar panels, as well as expanding that building type. Okay, next up is admin and statistical units. So there is a well-known and perceived value of enhancements to PSJ members and to some partners working across citizen services and health and social care. And the use cases focus mainly on the analysis for decision and policy making, such as the responses to COVID, and to support the levelling up policies like the UK broadband rollout. So in terms of outcomes and key findings, we've heard several examples of where having 2 sets of administrative boundaries in the market can cause confusion. Therefore, we're enhancing the accuracy of the admin and electoral boundaries, and will only publish 1 set of boundaries through this new data structure and access methodology. And I think it's important to note we're not withdrawing any of the other products as yet. We heard users want to access certain boundary types or a specific boundary, and that it needs to align with other boundary related data. Therefore, we're restructuring the admin boundary data into feature collections, such as an administrative feature type or a statistical feature type, to make it more accessible and easier to use. We're also going to better align it to the ONS data, and we're also going to add a country feature type. Users also told us they don't like the existing representation of the notional postcode boundaries, so that would be currently code point polygons, or the representation of multiple postcodes in a building, and if you're familiar with that data, they're referred to as vertical streets. So we're improving the model for managing buildings and also with the representation of polygons so that they don't intersect buildings or property polygons or land use sites, as we will call them. And we're improving that model for managing buildings with multiple postcodes. And by working closely with a range of PSJ members on urban extents, we were able to identify an opportunity to deliver additional value by enhancing the accuracy of those polygons and deriving them from a 25-meter grid instead of a 50-meter grid. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Nikki to talk about structures. Thank you.
Thanks, James. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about our key findings from the structures theme, pretty much supporting your key use cases for the protection of life and environment management and natural hazards user segment area. So the key findings and the outcomes that we found so far was that the outlined PSGA deliverables and enhancements specifically for field boundaries and flood defences wouldn't support the key customer use cases. So whilst talking to you through the user engagement about classifying field boundaries, we identified that the coverage we were initially proposing, so i.e. the classification to field boundaries adjacent to agricultural land, wasn't enough to support those key use cases. So therefore we extended the coverage of this to also include features adjacent to features such as forestry, heath and rough grassland. So this is to support those key use cases, including agricultural subsidy policy payments. It's also important for natural capital accounting, and also to understand habitat movements to help inform the biodiversity emergency that has been identified by government. So then additionally, with flood defences, as described in the PSGA and our proposed implementation of this, was identified as having limited value to you. So the desire was to have a more collaborative approach where we work not just with the national bodies, but also with other risk managers, for instance, local authorities who are responsible for flood defences, but also with companies like drainage authorities to produce a truly GB flood defence asset. So therefore, flood defence has been removed from the new PSGA content offering. However, in parallel, we will be continuing to support existing public sector initiatives for the capture of flood defence assets. So in addition to the user engagement that we have done, we're still listening and still asking the questions. And so during the recent Stage Gate 4 product design phase, we held additional user engagement on our house-based platform to assist with further defining the field boundaries height and width values. So helping us make more informed decisions around the implementation of this. And so then we'll move on to land cover. And our discussions with you with land cover confirmed that the outlined PSGA deliverables will support your key use cases. So specifically in rural land management, habitat modelling, design and administer of payments schemes and flood modelling. And it was really important to you, those working in the environment management and natural hazard segment. And specifically the main areas of interest were land cover type and percentage coverage. So during user engagement, we discussed 4 main areas of change. One was to reduce the size of large multi-classified land cover features to create a more detailed land cover map. Also to decrease OS's minimum size capture guidelines for land cover features in rural and mountain and moorland regions to align with the current urban region specification. Also, where multi-classified features continue to exist, to then provide a new percentage coverage attribute for each land cover classification within the topographic area. And then finally, to align with recognised land cover schemes, for instance, UNIS, the European Union National Information System land cover scheme, which we know is really popular with our Scottish public sector customers. And so we're continuing to investigate other schemes that will be useful to English and Welsh customers as well. So then moving on to our water theme, we have following the user engagement relating to that water theme, we recognise that the outlined PSGA deliverables are mostly aligned to supporting those key use cases, which include modelling, coastal erosion, flood scenarios, as well as flood risk management, environmental monitoring and policy reporting. So most of the items that we are proposing to deliver in this space are in line with the expectations. And our key findings was to source the water catchment information from the national bodies. And so that differed from our initial expectations. And based on the strong customer feedback, you really wanted this information sourced from the national bodies rather than OS create the data ourselves. So now we're looking at how we can source this information from all three of those national bodies, and also to provide 2 levels of catchment information. So water body catchments and river basin district catchments. So rather than just one level of information to help support all of those key use cases in flood risk management and policy monitoring and reporting. Additionally, in the water theme, we are following your feedback by continuing to investigate the options for improving the coverage and calculation of river width attribution. So now I'll hand over to Rebecca, who will talk through the findings from the land use theme.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. So looking at the land use data theme, then the enhancements that were identified here were really pulled out as quite high value by many of the PSAA members and the OS partners that we spoke to during the engagement, specifically looking at sectors around housing and planning, environmental management and natural hazards, as well as protection of life as well. So some of the key findings and outcomes then in this data theme is that both land use sites and land use on our topographical features were identified as needed to support and fulfill that kind of really wide range of customer use cases that were identified. There was really no clear preference coming out for one or the other. So we will be providing land use information on both those land use sites as well as on our topographical features. In terms of classification schemes, because of how many kind of schemes there are out there in existence, it was difficult to agree on a single one. And our users that we had spoken to, their preference kind of varied depending on what sector or use case we were looking at or discussing at the time. So that's led to an outcome of us providing kind of multiple classification schemes for land use sites. Our current proposal kind of includes including NOS classification, the NLUD, as well as addressing classification schemes, and that will be taken forward into our test and refine phases that Egbe was speaking about at the beginning. As well as our proposed classifications, our engagement has also shown us the importance of understanding the location of vacant and derelict land, specifically in the planning sector. So we will be including an additional classification for vacant and derelict land in the data where possible. And finally, the final point you can see on the slide there is that we did hear kind of quite minimal support for merging of adjacent sites that have the same identified land use. So we've heard you there, and we will provide land use sites at its most granular level to really give you that detail that you require, and adjacent sites of the same identified use will not be merged. Okay, so I will hand over now to Simon to look at the data theme of transport.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good morning, all. Transport needs have evolved significantly over the last 18 months. Significantly, both pandemic and Brexit has influenced many of the user needs and also policies within the transport sector. Transport touches so many markets, helping join citizen services, business, economic growth for the country. Therefore, multimodal transport networks are key to the essential accessibility for all. Policies often drive user needs, and to name a few policies, active travel, levelling up, building back better and decarbonisation are heavily influencing the transport sector. Through interviews and workshops, we've discovered that presence of paths, cycles and bus lanes are not supporting easy development and management. Also, reporting of success against policies for both government and local authorities is becoming more important. So better network definition is required. A growth area for transport also is greener and accessible networks to encourage more sustainable journeys for everyone. So what are we focusing on transport? We are focusing on defining a better joined up multimodal network for all forms of traffic, and that includes pedestrians, cycles, and vehicles, of course, and also rail. We also know that actually applying a start and end location for better management and development of travel networks is going to be important for management of understanding where investment is best placed and also recording success. We also recognise that simplifying the OS transport products by consolidating attribution and improving processing will improve processing and analysis. Improved analysis and routing is also going to be applied by applying geometry to the network features and restrictions within the network. And we're also going to explore, based on our feedback through our workshops earlier in March this year, around how we can improve the accessibility piece, which is not currently in the scope, but we want to look forward beyond what the current contract offers. I'd like to now hand over to Address with Egbay.
Thank you, Simon. So basically, the address data theme with the enhancements support various use cases across all segments, but a priority area for the protection of life segment. So that's going to be emergency services, blue light services. So essentially what we did was, again, as all my colleagues have said, kind of validating those use cases, which has helped us to kind of get that strong understanding of prioritization and refinement of this enhancement, which includes adding a classification code alongside the text description in the data model, just as my colleague Dean mentioned earlier on. We're also looking to prioritize addresses within high-rise buildings, so 18 meters and above, for address floor level information. So where we're kind of making improvements to that attribution, and that's been based on user engagement and what we've heard. And then what we'll like to do is kind of move in those conversations on is kind of with in terms of the detailed use classification, which is essentially improvements to the completeness of the use classification within the current addressing data, as we all know, looking at kind of the residential commercial live addresses such as HMOs, so houses in multiple occupation, caravan, supermarket, and we'd like to explore and prioritize the kind of significance of the detailed use classifications with our customers, PSJ members and partners, to kind of help us go through that prioritization. And we'll also like to engage more to prioritize the business names, which is kind of looking at improving the consistency and completeness of these business names, standardizing the depiction of things like chain stores, so where you have Marks and Spencer's, M&S, Marks and Sparks, so trying to just standardize that. Next slide, please. And then kind of moving on to the next data theme is geographical names. So the geographical names essentially provide orientation and identity to places of geographic significance, enabling those kind of quick and accurate gazetteer searches and visualization. The main use cases for this data theme is, again, the protection of life segment. And within the geographical names, what we are going to be doing is including a polygon representation of features in the geographical names theme. So those are kind of your geographical names of landforms, coastal cliffs kind of thing. As part of the deliverables for geographical names data themes, where we have got a list of data sets, such as names and locations of road junctions, motorway marker posts, additional non-address features, and vernacular names. This also includes the creation of the Emergency Services Gazetteer product that will provide a comprehensive and maintained location of names and places, which is integral and critical for locating incidents to save lives, property, and help tackle crime. So as a kind of, we've mentioned it in terms of COVID, the responses to COVID, especially within the protection of life segments, kind of evolved the way emergency services interrogates geospatial data. So what we did as part of the user engagement is confirm how and if the proposed Emergency Services Gazetteer would still meet their needs of that community. So as an outcome of that, we captured a few extra and additional requirements for access points to railway network and third-party bridge data to be added into the Emergency Services Gazetteer, which we're currently exploring. We're also, as part of that kind of exploration and from the user feedback, there was clear feedback for the unique persistent identifier in the Emergency Services Gazetteer to be the UPRN, which is a unique property reference number. So as an outcome of that, we are currently investigating assigning UPRNs to all features in ESG to enable that consistent referencing. And we're doing that in collaboration with GeoPlace to see if we can kind of make that a reality. And then kind of moving on to the last point, there's been an appetite for expert crowdsourced data from the emergency services community. So as a result of that, what we are looking to do is developing a vernacular names tool, which we use to source this vernacular names, alternative names, aliases from the emergency services and put in a, I guess, a database that will be maintained by Ordnance Survey. And that kind of concludes the data themes and the kind of outcomes and findings. What I'll do now is pass it on to my colleague, James, who would talk about some of those changes we've mentioned early on. James.
Yeah, back again. So this slide is a summary and reflects the enhancements and additions we're making where we can deliver even greater value to meet your use cases. So as a result of the ongoing user engagement, to help us design, co-design and shape the new richer data and services, we identified additional value by adding these feature types or attributes. And I'm not going through all of this slide. Obviously the slides will be shared in the follow-up, but just to give you some examples, the ones I mentioned in the buildings theme is enhancements to the building type. So we recognize that there was additional value in increasing the coverage from just residential to all other addressable building types. And from the increasing focus on decarbonisation and net zero, including where possible the presence of solar panels and green roofs against building feature types as well. As I said, I won't go through all the others. So if we can move on, then we're getting close to the end of the slide deck. So it's really just the next steps. Thank you. We've mentioned ongoing user engagement and the test and refine phase, so where we'll be sharing the alpha and beta sample data, which we're in the planning phase for now, but that starts from September this year and will run through until December. That's the current plan. In November, you'll be able to hear more about the PSAA program and the latest updates at the PSAA members conference, which I've been told is on the 3rd of November. And for the partner week, which will be running from the 15th of November. So we had a very successful partner week last year. And then from January next year, we'll be providing further updates and more information to ready OS partners and PSG members for the new ways to access OS data from April 2022. Which leads us onto that point, which is the points that Dean covered earlier in the slide deck. So this is about new ways to access existing data and that pick and mix and recipe and collections ordering as well. There's some formal UAT or user acceptance testing with the Geospatial Commission's expert user panel, which is taking place in February 2022. And then the final date there from April 2023 is when you'll be able to access the new richer data, so the 70 new data enhancements. Next slide, please. And the next slide is just a reminder of the ways in which you can reach out to the products team specifically about the PSGA. So this is our group email inbox if you want to reach out to us. So I'm going to hand back to Hannah to field any of the questions that may have come up in the chat. So of course, we'll take any questions from any of you in the remaining 5 or 10 minutes or so. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you, James, and thanks to all of the segment PMs. So while I wait for a couple of questions to come in, I just want to reiterate a couple of points that the team made there. This doesn't stop. This is something that OS and the team specifically are committed to. The user engagement program is something that is inherently linked to the PSGA, but kind of covers everything beyond that as well. So it's a program that will continue to run throughout these development phases. Yes, Partner Week is scheduled for the 15th of November, and there'll be more information on that shortly. We're also planning, making tentative plans for a physical partner conference in the middle of April next year. So all of our hopes are that any updates from this programme and other kind of partner initiatives will be fed into that as well. So watch out for those. It's worth also mentioning that we're totally aware that we're in the middle of the summer holidays at the moment. So this webinar will repeat on the 15th of September at 2 o'clock. So if you've got any colleagues who couldn't attend or who have got a question or want to hear a bit more information, then this same webinar repeats on the 15th of September, and they can use the same registration link that you used to sign up for that. We haven't got any questions that have come through, so I would urge anyone on the call who wants to feedback straight to that futuregeo@os.uk email address if it's related to specific content or questions for the segment PMs, or to use the webinars@os.uk address if it's about webinars in general or ideas for future webinars as well. If you want to give me any ideas or thoughts or feedback about the various activities that we're doing in Partner Week or Partner Conference, you can use that webinars email address as well, or contact me directly.